Off the southern coast of Greece, in the spring of 1900, a group of sponge divers stumbled upon something that would quietly rewrite everything we thought we knew about the ancient world. They had been forced by a storm to shelter near a small, rocky island called Antikythera, and when conditions calmed, they slipped beneath the surface to search for sponges. What they found instead was the wreck of an ancient Roman-era cargo ship lying about 45 meters below the waves. The ship was filled with bronze and marble statues, glassware, jewelry, and coins, a treasure trove of antiquity. But hidden among all that ancient splendor was a single corroded lump of bronze, no larger than a shoebox, that would prove to be the most extraordinary discovery of them all. At first, no one paid it much attention. The statues were far more impressive. The lump of encrusted metal was catalogued, shipped to a museum in Athens, and largely forgotten. It sat in storage for nearly 2 years before a researcher named Valerios Stais noticed something deeply unusual. The corroded mass had begun to split apart as it dried, and through the cracks, he could see something that should not have been there: the unmistakable teeth of a finely crafted gear. Inside that ancient, barnacle-covered shell was a mechanical device of breathtaking complexity. It contained at least 30 interlocking bronze gears, engraved scales, rotating dials, and what appeared to be a sophisticated system for tracking the movements of celestial bodies. The craftsmanship was so precise, so deliberate, so far beyond anything else known to exist from that era, that scientists and historians struggled to find the words to describe it. Some simply refused to believe what they were seeing. The ship that carried this object is believed to have sunk sometime around 60 to 70 BCE, though the device itself may be older. Possibly constructed as early as 150 BCE or perhaps even earlier. That places its creation in the ancient Greek world, more than 2,000 years before the mechanical clocks and astronomical instruments of medieval Europe. And yet, based on everything we now understand about this object, it was more sophisticated than anything Europe would produce for at least 14 centuries after it disappeared beneath the sea. The researchers who first examined the device were credentialed scholars working in the early 20th century, and their confusion was entirely understandable. Nothing in the historical record had prepared them for this. Ancient Greek technology, as documented in surviving texts and artifacts, was impressive, but largely mechanical in the straightforward sense: levers, pulleys, water clocks, catapults. Nothing remotely suggested that ancient craftsmen had mastered the art of creating precision gear trains capable of modeling the cosmos. When the scientific community began to take a serious interest in the mechanism in the decades that followed, they brought increasingly sophisticated tools to bear on it. Radiographic imaging in the 1970s revealed the internal structure of the device in stunning detail. Researchers could now see that the gears were not merely decorative or symbolic. They were functional, interacting with one another through a series of carefully calculated gear ratios that allowed the device to perform genuine astronomical computations. What those computations revealed was staggering. The mechanism could predict the positions of the sun and moon in the zodiac. It could track the phases of the lunar cycle. It contained a dial for predicting solar and lunar eclipses, based on the ancient Babylonian astronomical cycle known as the Saros cycle, a pattern of eclipses that repeats every 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours. The device even accounted for the irregular motion of the moon across the sky, a phenomenon that requires understanding the elliptical nature of the lunar orbit. This is not simple observation. This is mathematical modeling of celestial mechanics encoded in bronze. Later studies using three-dimensional surface scanning and advanced imaging technology allowed researchers to read inscriptions on the device that had previously been illegible. What they found was an instruction manual of sorts, text describing how to use the mechanism, references to planetary cycles, and evidence that the device may have also tracked the movements of at least some of the known planets. One analysis suggested the mechanism could model the motions of all 5 planets visible to the naked eye. If confirmed, that would make it not merely a lunar calendar or eclipse predictor, but a full mechanical model of the known solar system. The device is now known as the Antikythera Mechanism, named for the island near which the shipwreck was discovered. It is housed in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, where fragments of the original object are displayed alongside reconstructions that attempt to show what the complete device might have looked like. Those reconstructions are themselves remarkable things, intricate, beautiful, humbling in their complexity. The question that haunts every person who studies this object is a simple one: how did this exist? Ancient Greek science was genuinely sophisticated. Figures like Archimedes, Hipparchus, and Eratosthenes made contributions to mathematics, astronomy, and physics that were not surpassed for over 1,000 years. Ancient texts describe mechanical devices, automata, and astronomical instruments of various kinds. There are references in classical literature to devices that could model the heavens. The Roman writer Cicero described seeing a mechanical sphere that could replicate the movements of the sun, moon, and planets, a device reportedly created by Archimedes himself. Some researchers believe the Antikythera Mechanism may be directly connected to the tradition of Archimedes, or to a school of mechanical philosophy that flourished on the island of Rhodes, which was a major center of astronomical and mechanical learning in the ancient world. The ship that carried the device may have been traveling from Rhodes, which would place the mechanism squarely within that intellectual tradition. And yet, if such devices existed, if the ancient Greeks had developed this level of mechanical sophistication, why do we have only this one? Why did the tradition apparently die out? Why is there no clear line of technological descent connecting the Antikythera mechanism to the mechanical clocks that Europeans began building more than 1,000 years later? These are the questions that push the mystery into genuinely unsettling territory. Some scholars argue that the answer is simply historical accident. Ancient knowledge was fragile. Libraries burned, wars erased entire intellectual traditions. The destruction of the Great Library at Alexandria, the repeated upheavals of the ancient Mediterranean world, the collapse of the Western Roman Empire. Any or all of these catastrophes could have severed the thread that connected this extraordinary object to whatever knowledge produced it. On this view, the Antikythera mechanism is not an anomaly, it is a survivor. The true anomaly is that everything else was lost. Others are not so easily satisfied. They point to the sheer magnitude of the gap between this device and everything else we know about ancient technology. Even granting the sophistication of Greek science, the mechanism represents a leap that feels difficult to explain through gradual development alone. Where are the intermediate steps? Where are the simpler gear-based astronomical devices that should have preceded this one? The absence of any clear technological lineage troubles those who believe that complex innovations do not typically appear without precursors. This is where the theories begin to branch in unexpected directions. Some researchers have proposed that the mechanism represents a tradition of knowledge that was deliberately kept secret, the specialized craft of a small community of artisans who guarded their techniques carefully and whose work was therefore never widely documented. On this view, the silence of the historical record is not evidence of absence, but of secrecy. Others have gone further, suggesting that the mechanism hints at a broader lost civilization, a period of human intellectual and technological achievement that has been largely erased from history, leaving only occasional artifacts like this one to suggest its existence. This theory is speculative and lacks direct supporting evidence, but it has proven persistently compelling to those who feel that the conventional historical narrative leaves too many questions unanswered. And then there are those who simply sit with the mystery without reaching for an explanation. They look at the Antikythera mechanism and allow themselves to feel the full weight of what it represents. A 2,000-year-old machine that could calculate the movements of the cosmos, built by hands that have long since turned to dust, for purposes we can only partially reconstruct, by a civilization that apparently took this knowledge with it when it fell. What we know for certain is this: the device is real. It has been studied by some of the world's leading experts in the history of science, in ancient languages, in mechanical engineering, and in astronomy. Their conclusions are not fringe speculation. They are the product of decades of rigorous investigation using the most advanced analytical tools available, and their conclusions confirm that this object should not exist, not according to our understanding of what ancient people were capable of building. There are fragments of the mechanism that have never been fully analyzed. There are inscriptions that remain partially illegible. There are gear arrangements whose precise function is still debated. Every few years, a new study reveals something previously unknown about the device, and every new revelation tends to deepen the mystery rather than resolve it. The shipwreck itself has been revisited multiple times, and additional fragments of the mechanism have been recovered. Researchers believe that more pieces may still lie on the seafloor, buried in sediment, waiting. Each new fragment has the potential to answer questions that have puzzled scholars for over a century, or to raise entirely new ones. What was this device used for? Was it a teaching tool meant to demonstrate astronomical principles? Was it a navigational aid? Was it a kind of calendar for religious or civic purposes? Was it the personal instrument of a wealthy patron who commissioned it as a demonstration of Greek scientific achievement? We do not know. We may never know. What we do know is that somewhere in the ancient world, more than 2,000 years ago, a mind, or perhaps many minds, understood the movements of the heavens with such precision and such depth that they were able to encode that understanding in bronze, in gears, in the turning of small metal teeth against one another. They built a machine that could think about time and space and the motion of celestial bodies in ways that the rest of humanity would not rediscover for over a millennium. And then it sank. It lay in the dark water for 2,000 years, waiting to be found. Waiting to remind us that the story of human knowledge is not a simple line moving steadily upward. It is something stranger, more fragile, and far more surprising than that. The question is not just what the Antikythera Mechanism tells us about the ancient world. The question is what it tells us about everything we think we know about history, and how much of that history may still be lying undiscovered somewhere beneath the waves. If this story made you think differently about the ancient world, you are not alone. These are the kinds of mysteries that have a way of staying with you. If you want to keep exploring the unexplained, the artifacts, the anomalies, and the questions that conventional history struggles to answer, consider subscribing so you do not miss what comes next. And if you have a theory about the Antikythera Mechanism, or another ancient mystery you think deserves this kind of attention, leave it in the comments. Some of the best leads in this kind of investigation come from people who are paying close attention